builds and builds and builds.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other day, I just made a point. I sat down. I'm going to write a blog post. And when I was doing it, I had quite a few sort of full starts, but a few different sort of thoughts came to me. I kind of rewrote one about sort of 3 times, then had one and kind of published it. But then I had kind of, reawoken that little bit of my brain. So then the next morning, I like, no, I'm just going to write. And I had a few sort of thoughts which had come out of the writing from the day before. And then also just the practice, my brain remembered how to do it. So I could just start kind of writing things and then on and on and on and on. So it's that thing, just the more I do it, the easier it is. And so don't do things like content calendar because I read what I wrote the day before, the day afterwards. So there's some sort of thread in my mind at least.
Yeah. What speaks to me is the block I've had is the creative process, because like a lot of time I would start with writing a blog post saying I need to have a blog post done by this hour, and how that really didn't help, and rather it felt too much pressure, and I needed to make it make sense while actually starting a process of just getting words on paper. And then a lot of the time when I do that, what I wanted to write at the beginning, it doesn't end up the thing that I actually write. But it feels a lot more satisfying because the right topic emerges, and the thing that I've had to deal with is nothing emerges, and that's okay. For those of you who've stumbled into this conversation,
waking up to writing,
we're just talking about how our morning has started, and Ben was just sharing his writing practice that he's kicked off. I'd be curious, any of you here listening, do you have a regular writing practice? Please type into the chat, say yay or nay, or yes, and this is what I do, or no, I fucking hate it. And this is why. It would be nice to get to know that there's people out there. I think we've got 12 of you here today, it looks like at the moment. It usually builds up over the time of the webinar. So for those of you who are new to this, or and if you're not, I'm going to say it anyway. This is a regular webinar that Ben and I put together. We've now called it Waking Up to Money, and this is because A, it's in the morning, and B, I think the essence of what we're talking about when we're talking about pricing is really waking up to the things that really stop us from pricing well. And so we're trying to host these regular conversations just to explore that idea of the deeper knowledge or awareness we need to have when we want to price well and create therefore sustainable businesses that make us feel happy. But we'd also love to hear your questions and your thoughts, and we invite people to come up live and to share that. And so if you have a question, particularly on the topic today, which is what if your clients knew that you are doing a pricing course? Is that okay? Would you scare them off? So if it's anything around that topic, you have a question or any question around pricing, please post it either in the chat or there's an ask a question feature on Crowdcast, which really helps us pick out the questions, and also you can vote them up and down. So if there's a question there that's already been posted that you find really interesting or you'd love to hear answered, then you can just vote it up, and then we'll invite, if you want the person who's asked the question.
Can we vote it down then?
Oh, we can vote it down. We can delete it. We have full control.
Wow, the power.
Exactly. We control the story. It's all about controlling the message. Dizzy has said she's been doing morning pages from the Artist's Way for many years. I don't know what morning pages is. Do you know what morning pages is?
Carlos, I know. Yes,
I've heard about it, but I don't actually know what it is.
Yes. Well, my simple understanding is basically taking, a certain amount of time. I think it was done on time or on amount of pages, just to kind of write words. But I may not be doing it justice with that explanation.
Dizzy, if you
unstructured writing rather
unstructured
than
writing,
just sort of writing something in particular.
Okay, cool.
clearly she's written a whole book on this, and 3 pages. There we go.
3 pages. Okay. All right. So Alex has tried to dabble, but sustaining it is a challenge. Yes, it is. In the end, it is. It's like good habits, hard to start, easy to quit.
A literal download. There we go.
Brilliant. So in my words, brain vomit. Cool. Well, that is a bit of a sidetrack there. Which I think actually we've been talking about the idea of writing and storytelling and how that could relate to pricing and money stories. And so watch this space. We are throwing around some ideas with a good friend, Marianne Powell, who's been doing some writing workshops for us in the community. So we were looking to see how to integrate that because there's something interesting there. But in the meantime, are we allowed... Is it okay for our clients to know that we're learning about pricing, Ben? And actually, maybe starting off, or I'll propose 2 ways to do this. We could start off by saying why we think it's not a good idea, or why we might think it's not a good idea, and then maybe we can go into why we think it's a good idea. And of course, we've got vested interest because we're doing a pricing course. Any way we can convince you all to do the pricing course, and so yeah, of course that makes sense. Is great for us, but. We'd love to just explore this idea, what stops us from really purposefully doing the work around learning about pricing. And like I said, if you have any questions that in terms of your own journey while you're watching this around pricing and things that get in your way, please pop them into the questions box so that we can then, if possible, help you or give you some pointers. So Ben, why would you be scared for your clients to know that you're doing a pricing course?
I would not be scared. No, that wasn't the question. So I think, as you sort of alluded to, kind of unashamedly, I think the reason this thought came up was thinking about marketing the course, thinking about marketing anything really, the marketing and selling of anything. One of the most important things for other people who are considering to sort of buy the thing, do the thing, whatever it is that you might be offering, is that other people have done it. We had a really great cohort of people who did the first time. But I was remembering when we were talking to Becky, who had been on the first cohort before she joined the course. And in fact, we were doing a bit of a kind of money clinic type thing, I think is what this was called in the olden days. And I remember Becky kind of making reference to that as a sort of bit of a sort of sideline kind of joke, or what if my clients kind of knew that I was here? And we sort of spoke about it a little bit at the time, but I kind of had that sort of thought then kind of percolating kind of ever since. And then I was thinking about it in the context of the pricing course for kind of everybody who went on the pricing course, and kind of all the great sort of community and sort of learning that kind of happened with that. But was then sort of thinking, well, maybe there is actually a little bit of a kind of an obstacle which is worth calling out here, which is, maybe people have, and, feel free to kind of agree or disagree and drop it into the comments, but maybe people have this sort of question, this sort of doubt, or I'm not sure kind of best how to kind of categorize it, but this sort of feeling that somehow if I am getting better at pricing, that I'm winning and my clients are losing, maybe, because somehow I'm tricking them or I'm extracting more from them. Like I said, it's a kind of question assumption. I'm not really sure how to kind of categorize it, because Becky didn't go to that length to say that that's kind of what her feeling was, but she did kind of articulate this thing, which is, what if my clients did know that I was here? And so I guess, the kind of the question that I have come at is, is the thing that's behind that this kind of feeling somehow that if I price better, if I price more courageously, more confidently, price happier, as we talk about on the course, if I do all of those things, somehow my clients are losing a little bit because they're having to pay me a little bit more. And maybe that's why I wouldn't want my clients to know that I'm doing it, because somehow they would then know that I was kind of learning about these things, learning some tools, learning some approaches, which was going to mean that I was earning more. And if I was earning more, somehow they have less. And so I guess that was the kind of extrapolation in my mind as to maybe the kind of doubt, the fear that was that Becky alluded to before she had done the course before. And maybe then a question that other people would, a kind of doubt that other people would share.
Nice. Well, I put a little poll there, actually, and I got it wrong the first time round. Isn't the first time I've miswritten something today. Pricing well means I win, they lose, as in they being the clients. So, again, just I'd love to get you to answer based on that, just the pure gut instinct to begin with. I know you conceptually, you can probably know what the answer should be in your heads, but if you were just going to think about this and thinking about your pricing, what would be your gut feeling around what it meant to price well? And also I just put a little poll here as well in terms of how much have you thought about pricing, how intentional are you about your pricing, and is it something you've been doing a lot, just a little, or you just really basically head in the sand, rather not think about it because it's a bit too challenging. And it'd give us a feel as well for the energy in the room and the needs in the room, really, because we want to be guided more by your needs and what would be a useful stuff to share with you. I would say my gut feeling at the beginning when I was thinking about pricing, particularly even when we were running a service business, there was this thing about there's an awkward feeling that pricing more meant it would hurt them. And there's something around, actually, I remember saying, if it didn't make people feel uncomfortable, then you were pricing too low. And while in one hand, intellectually, that makes sense, it didn't feel right. It was like, oh, why do I want them to feel bad? And so there's this thing then that kind of sort of stopped me from being a bit more free with thinking about price. I don't know if that's something that you've encountered or you've heard in your experiences, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things that come up when you're saying that. One is the kind of idea that I think how we relate to money, so, in our work and, of course, then in our life, which then manifests in sort of price, how we relate to that sort of defines a little bit how we relate to all of the things of our work and all of the things kind of of our life in a way. And that's a bit of a sort of lofty thing. But I think what you're talking about, this freedom, I think that's the important thing, isn't it? To have a kind of freeness in the sort of relationship to it, a freeness in the relationship to kind of how we price, a freeness in the relationship in how we're interacting and working with our clients and the relationship that we have there, so that it's not all about the money. Because I think where you were kind of alluding to, asking the question behind the thought behind the poll a little bit, like, is this too complicated a thing to kind of get you too big a thing to get your head around? I think where it feels that way for people, it's because we're sort of elevating the importance of money too much in some respects. And, clearly that sounds like a weird thing to say because we're talking about money here. But I think what we're talking about, the other thing you started to reference, which I think is actually really important, is freeness. Yeah, I mean, using money, using price as a weapon to kind of make your clients feel kind of weak and a bit beaten and a bit kind of sick in their stomach is clearly ultimately not really very good for anybody. And I think, really our intent and what we kind of want to help people kind of enjoy the benefit really is that there is a bit more freeness to it. Because if there is a bit more freeness to the relationship to the money, which kind of manifests in how we price, there's a bit more kind of freeness in the relationship to the client, a bit more of a symbiotic relationship with the client, a bit more like, I'm invested in your good outcome and you're invested in my good outcome. So this kind of feeling of kind of working together. And the more you get that feeling of working together with your clients, the more valuable you're going to be. And the kind of essence of everything that we're talking about is the more valuable that you are, the more opportunity there is then to share in that value. But it's kind of, you say again, whilst it is kind of weird in the context of talking about money and a pricing course, I think the kind of realization I was having as you were sort of talking there, that actually what we're really talking about is how you can kind of reduce the importance of money, actually make money, make price feel less of important. Because when we put it up, it's the most important thing or it's the hardest thing. We're kind of investing a huge amount in it. But actually maybe if it's more, we're focused on that kind of the quality of the relationship that we have with our client, the quality of the relationship that we have with our work, that what we earn becomes a kind of happy byproduct of that health, that the quality of that relationship.
We have a question or a comment here from Kate. And she says, surely you want your client to be delighted they have found a solution to their problem. And that's the value. I assume you agree wholeheartedly with that then. Ben?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, exactly what you're saying, Kate, that's kind of totally right. And what, the more you are kind of not focused on that, the less able you're going to be to provide the solution. And if you're kind of distracted, worried, kind of sort of about money, you're not really wholly invested in helping the client solve their problem. And if you're not really wholly invested in that, then, the value of your work is less. So, yeah, I think that sums it up very well, Kate. Thank you for that.
So I'm going to push that a bit further now. So you found a solution that delights your customer and thinks, oh, yeah, there's value there. I need that solved. Then there's putting a number to that value. So, Kate, I'd be curious to hear from you how you think about that in terms of, okay, there is a problem that's worth solving here and the client really needs it solving. Then how do you how have you thought about putting a number to that? And maybe Ben, you can, I don't know if you want to talk to that, because there's that's the next step, I feel.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, that's clearly a critical step. And certainly for me, the way that I've always kind of sort of worked with that, and what we then talk about on the course is helping your client kind of explore what the value of solving the problem is. And, in kind of easy situations, there's some sort of tangible outcome, some tangible return. You made reference to when you had a service business, same with me, you have an agency, and there might be something kind of tangible you're working on. The reason that the problem that the client wants solving can be easily quantified. They want more customers. They want customers to spend more. They want customers to spend longer. They want customers to introduce other people. I don't know, all of these things, which are a bit more kind of quantifiable, a bit easier to put a kind of an absolute kind of number on. And exploring really what the client's kind of motivation is a kind of hugely important part of this whole kind of process of getting to the place of being able to understand what something is worth. Because even where there isn't a kind of quantifiable, a tangible thing, actually there is still value, which is why the client is buying. And so kind of helping them with kind of references, helping them with discussion, helping them with kind of exploration, start to kind of feel out what the kind of financial value of your service might be, even if it's qualitative, starts to point to what it is worth to the client, what solving the problem is worth to the client.
Kate has some interesting points. So I think this is an opportunity, rather than to just try and guess from your words on the chat, the real, the essence of the context that you're working with. Would you like to join us, Kate? And maybe you can talk a bit more to the issue. The issue that you hear is about having different prices for different clients, and then what that means each time, trying to find the number. So if you're up for that, please say that in the chat, and we can bring you up to have a little bit of a discussion around it and see if we can offer some thoughts and ideas that are grounded in a reality rather than us just talking a bit too theoretically about this stuff. Let us know. In the meantime, it's interesting, we talk about on the course, or the thing that springs to mind when we're here talking about what governs the number. There's this idea of an anchor, I think you talk about, Ben. Mm-hmm. And one of the anchors in my mind is the market rate. So when we were building websites for people, there was like kind of this anchor in the ether. It wasn't even like nailed down. Kate's getting out of the running. I love this. This is why it's so great. This is live.
Pajamas.
You wouldn't have planned this.
Pajamas.
But like as a web design agency, I thinking back now, the kind of the invisible anchor was the day rate of a developer or day rate of a designer. And that was the kind of the perception I think a lot of clients would come as they'd shopped around, they'd understood a day rate and they'd said, okay, they're kind of basing how much we were worth based on that. And so that was a hindrance to us. And so in terms of the freeness, we were less free because that was the thing that we were working with. So I'd be curious, and if anyone else out there who's had that similar kind of experience, what would you have told me, Ben, in those days?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So you introduced the idea of kind of anchor, which we do sort of talk about, which is essentially the kind of first figure that a client or customer has in mind from which they consider everything else. And actually, you were sort of talking about it a little bit in the context of like a negative anchor, the market rate, because of course, there's no such thing as a market rate. We tell ourselves there is a thing such as a market rate, like my competitors all charge this, or if you want a website from a company like mine, it costs that, or if you want coaching from somebody like me, it costs that. But actually, there is no market rate. That is totally an illusion and a story that we tell ourselves. And, you know, there's another thing which is kind of coming up is about controlling the comparisons a little bit. I think it is important to use things like an anchor. So if you're having an exploratory conversation with a customer or a client, you know, it is really helpful to frame that conversation with, you know, it could be between this and it could be between that kind of figures, because it directs the conversation. And within that, there should be one of those figures, which is higher than you think it should be. And I think, Simpson, you made the point earlier about whether there should be discomfort. I don't think you should make the client uncomfortable, but actually there should be something in what you're saying that maybe makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable, because it means you are challenging yourself to talk about the value of what you do in materially different ways, and using these ideas of anchor, using these kind of tools around a range to be able to explore what something is worth with the client. And I know Kate will, once she's out of her running gear, will kind of be able to sort of talk about this. But I think one of my kind of first thoughts, and we can get into it, is, you know, Kate's talking about the problem of negotiating afresh every time. At least that's how I understand it. And she can sort of tell me otherwise. I think for me, that actually, again, this is a mindset thing. That's an opportunity. I think the important thing is to have a consistent process, a consistent way of getting to the price, but also then really important to accept the work that you do is worth different amounts to different people in almost every instance. And it's kind of right and okay to engage on that basis.
Cool. Well, I've invited Kate on screen now because she's back. So we'll see if we can get her to just talk a bit more to where she's at and what the specific challenges are. When you were talking there, we got Kate. Excellent. Hey, I know which Kate it is. It's really hard to know.
I'm still a bit sweaty.
No worries. I think there's going to be some alignment with Ben here. I think you've got very similar mindsets around life, business, and work. But for the benefit of Ben, maybe share a little bit about the work you do, and then specifically the types of clients you work with and the challenges you're facing.
Okay, so I work as a coach, mainly executive, leadership, and so on. But I also do a lot of mindful leadership. So, helping organizations become, more mindful, and also teaching mindfulness, from scratch. So it's really where, when it comes to the coaching, that's a lot more straightforward. But particularly when it comes into, I guess, mindful design of organizations or of leadership, that's where it starts to get really kind of fuzzy. And I think part of it is because it's relatively new in terms of, organizations. And there's a lot of people who have, for example, been a mindfulness trainer and want to get into organizations. And so they're prepared to, basically do things for free, because, and I totally get that. It's the loss leader in order to actually, get in there and start building, their brand. But what it does is it undermines the work that people who've been involved in that area for a long time have been, the skills and the experience that we bring. So it's really fuzzy. And in terms of the clients, it depends if I'm working with individuals, maybe an individual leader, or if I'm working for a, like a B Corp, or whether I'm working for a major multinational, and it's guesswork every time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Over to you, Ben. Guesswork. How can we make it less guesswork, I assume, is the question.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kate, for coming and joining us in our sort of radio stroke webinar studio out of your running gear.
It's jersey thrown on top. Anyway,
there's loads of really rich stuff in your question, and there's loads of different kind of aspects to it. One, the thing around everybody or lots of people in the space offering things for free to get in the door, and what to do about that, like that probably warrants a whole radio show in its kind of own right. My kind of feeling around that is, this is all about, money is a hugely important signal, right? And whenever a client or customer, whatever, is considering buying you, they're spending the whole time looking for signals. And they're signals that we either consciously are projecting or signals that we are blindly projecting. And money is a hugely important one. And so is free, right? And actually where a supplier is offering something for free, they're sending quite a clear signal about value, because whether we like it or not, we basically equate money with a measure of value. And I know from my own experience, actually, when I was running my last business, where we shift from trying to charge not very much because we took the view, which was it was better to get a relationship going, that I was just a hiding to nothing, basically. We didn't actually get anywhere until I accidentally put the prices up by about 20 times on one conversation, and that client bought straight away. And that's really one of the key things which kind of got me thinking about this, was actually being much more expensive made it much easier for our client to buy what we were doing. So that is just kind of one point. And the thing around that is, if I had planned that scenario that I was in that one situation, I probably never would have done it. It was a bit of a slip of the tongue, but it was a really kind of fortuitous slip of the tongue, because I was able to kind of see the kind of benefit of doing it. So just on the point around the kind of free thing, I think there's a really important positioning to hold your line with that. And where a client is basically just super swayed by the idea of free, then maybe they don't really appreciate the value of what you're doing. And then maybe they're not going to be the right kind of client, because once we have started with free, it's quite difficult to reframe that value in their mind. And so one thing I would say, that's not to say that you don't use other things, like you do charge them. Some of the stuff you do charge them, you do say there is a cost, there is an investment in this because it's important. But, you can say if it doesn't work out for you, you can have the money back, or it's kind of, there are other ways of basically making it an easier purchase decision, of de-risking it, but never, offering free. I think leave that to the masses and reinforce your position by standing behind the expertise that you have. I appreciate that wasn't actually your question. That was just something that I kind of picked up on at the beginning.
Yeah, it wasn't really a question. They were more sort of observations.
Yeah. And so then the other thing you were saying is the kind of fuzziness. You used the kind of word fuzzy a couple of times. I like the word fuzzy. That's good. And so I guess you were talking about kind of B Corp, different kinds of clients and what to do. Is the issue a little bit that you find it kind of problematic that it is kind of being renegotiated every time, or is the feeling that it's because it feels like guesswork?
I think it feels like guesswork, and it's probably because it's quite sort of new, the way that we're doing it. So, we can do a fair amount of market research, but not a huge amount. So it is a bit of, a sort of guesswork and, and what sticks. And I think having had experience in all these different types of organizations, I know that there are very different, sort of budgets. And it's coming back to what you're saying about, their level of risk. And so it's not only kind of working out the budget, but about how risk averse, they are.
Yeah. So these are really great things to explore with your client. So one of the things that we look at in the course are the questions that you can use to help understand what a client's motivation is, and also their appetite. So kind of motivation and appetite are the key things really which determine what the value of something is to someone. And one of the really, really effective questions that I've kind of found in my own work is asking a client, well, what's the cost of not doing this?
Yeah, which is a coaching question. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. And so, and I think so, using your skills, using your abilities as a coach to kind of tease out from the client beforehand, what you're starting to do is starting to understand their motivation. You're starting to understand what the value of the piece of work is to them. Because I think it's really right that, a public company, let's say, kind of sort of big public company, the value of your work around the kind of leadership piece and all of that is materially different to the value of your work to a B Corp, as is their ability to pay in some instances. So all of these things. And I think whilst it doesn't need to kind of turn it into a kind of huge, long drawn out kind of process, oftentimes we may only have an opportunity to have one conversation with a prospective client before we give them a proposal. What I would say is it's critically important to talk to them about money in that instance. So, having a few questions that you can default to, which point to like what is the cost of not doing this, points to, it invites them to start talking about the value of it. Equally, you can be asking them around budget. I know very few people say that they have a budget, but of course, everybody does have an idea about budget. And one of the other ways of kind of teasing that out of people, if you say, do you have a budget for this? And they say, no, you can say to them, well, for organizations like yours, I've worked on projects which are anything between 100,000 and 20,000 or 120, whatever the kind of number is. Yeah. And you will find out instantly, because either they'll fall off their chair or they'll hang up or they will kind of look sort of blank. And actually you're getting all of the signals about actually their appetite and their appreciation of their kind of understanding of the value. Yeah. And I think, even just with a sort of toolkit of things to explore with them just on that one session, that one kind of setup call, you will start to get a feeling for what the value of the work is to them. So it isn't finger in the air. And that actually is, I don't know if you use that phrase, we speak about a lot that on the course, which is actually what a lot of people do. It feels like guesswork. It feels like finger in the air.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to help people do is move beyond guesswork by exploration, by understanding, by starting to get the client to talk about money beforehand. You kind of move very quickly from a place of guessing to a place of the client giving you the information that you need. And then you're going back to them using the information that they've given you. So it's not guesswork. It's about how you draw out those little clues and guidance from the client in advance of giving them a cost.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, I'll let someone else take over.
Thank you very much,
really
Kate.
Okay.
That's really awesome.
Bye.
I really appreciate your input. I feel
you can't. You're in now forever.
yeah. I'm not sure how you do get out of this. I think usually there's. Let me see.
I was just going to go sweat.
Here we go. I can do this. I'll do it for you. Here we go. Boom. It's interesting there. Given that Kate works a lot in the mindfulness area, I can't help but think this is about mindfully finding the value for people. And I think what sprang up to me as well here was this: there's the value, the perceived value of a client, and the ability to pay a certain amount of money. And when you were talking about there's a corporate client and maybe a smaller or a B Corp or a smaller client, for instance, and again not B Corp, a smaller client, the perceived value might be exactly the same, or if not even more for the smaller client. It's just they don't have the same amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're talking about money becoming secondary, it's like for me, it's disconnecting first the money from the value to a certain level, because there's the value, and for me, there's the perceived value, there's an appetite to do something, and then there's a question, okay, how much can you pay for this? And then that becomes much more of a two-way conversation. It's like, I need to be paid this much in order to do my work, and you are able only to pay this much for that work. are we meant to be?
Mm.
I don't know if that's confused things more, but that's what came up when you started talking about the value and the appetite and the perception of value there.
Mm. Yeah, and I think you're right. The kind of the perception of value may be similar, but a kind of perception of value is also a bit linked to what the client expects to get back, and so in that sense, in some regard, the perception of value for a kind of big company which is trying to instill some sort of mindful leadership in its executive team. It's kind of easier, I think, to get to a place where you're helping them understand the value of that. I'm a company which has, I don't know, 500 million pounds worth of sales, whatever it might be. Like, I'm a big company. What's the value of your executive leadership team having a bit more kind of mindfulness in their approach, a little bit less reactivity, ability to kind of think a little bit more clearly? I think you could lead that client to a place where they understand the value of that in quite material ways that's potentially very, very large given the start point. Whereas if I'm a small business, I'm a one person, or I'm me and a business partner, the perception of value, i.e. the feeling like the problem is solved, feels very, very great. But what we're starting to uncover through our questions and our exploration is actually where the value of the solution translates to a money amount in quite a different way, if that also makes sense.
No, that makes sense. I think this is all part of trying to make it easier for our clients to buy us, to give them a level of certainty. And for me, this whole conversation this morning is how this idea of learning about how to price is less about a kind of a confrontation of like, how can I equip myself with the weapons in order to beat my client? But how do we actually create more of a dialogue so there's a real clear mutual understanding so that we both come to the same conclusion about this is worth this much and that's why we're going to work together.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Excellent. Dizzy asks, how much is our money course?
Good question, Dizzy. So if you pre-register, you will find out in the coming weeks what the course is going to be. So I encourage you, get your name on the list and you will be the first to find out when the course is launched in a couple of weeks' time. And I do remind, actually, Dizzy did have a question as well, which I completely failed to answer about 3 weeks ago.
Okay, go for it. Well, I'm just going to speak to the whole pricing thing. It's like we are trying to put into practice what we teach. Mm-hmm. And the value of this course is really, like I said, it's truly getting an understanding of who it is we're going to have on the program and the kind of changes we're going to make. And we have an idea of what it is, but the more we know of who's interested in it, the more we can actually pitch it at the right level so that the people who get on board really commit to it. And so we're, to be brutally honest, we're still trying to hone in on the right number because there's lots of ways that we can do this. But at the same time, this is part of what we're trying to tell you. It's like, this isn't just, okay, the price is this and just get on board. But we will give you, if you do pre-register, we will let you know, and then you'll have a choice as to say, is that valuable to you? And the purpose of these webinars is to help you understand, actually, this is the kind of stuff that you'll learn and the shifts you'll make. You said you wanted to you had a question you wanted to answer from Dizzy.
Yeah, Dizzy had asked a question the other week, which we didn't get to. And just a point there, so is it expensive, Joe? No, it's not expensive, but it's extremely valuable, which is a very different thing. Anyway, I think Dizzy was asking before about the difference between selling into different countries, into different markets. If I sell something North America, is it different to if I'm selling to somebody here, and sort of versions thereof? The international markets, yes. So the point around that, Dizzy, is about the international markets. I think the thing that we're interested in, like I was also just talking about with Kate, is a process and having a consistent process that you can use every time in every conversation that you have, so that each client that you speak to is able to be invited and encouraged to pay what it's worth to them. So it's never to say, oh, I'm selling in North America, therefore it should cost this, or I'm selling in Europe, therefore it should cost that. It's having this consistent approach so that maybe the person in North America is willing and able to pay X on this day, and somebody in Europe is able to pay Y on that day. But it's not about where they're from. It's about how you've been able to kind of learn that before you give them the price, essentially.
Yes, exactly. And rather than feel like you're reinventing the wheel every single time, we hope that, our wish is you'll be equipped with many more tools to, like Ben said, to ask the right questions and get the right signals so that you can then be more confident and not be apologetic about the price you want to charge. Awesome. Cool. Well, again, another emergent journey. Thank you very much, Kate, for prompting us with your thoughts and direction on how we could sort of communicate more about the value of understanding how to price well. Any final thoughts, Ben?
The only final thought, which isn't really in response to the questions, is that the two things which kind of feel like are coming up a little bit. One, this thing around getting away from guesswork pricing, getting away from finger in the air pricing. Feels like it should be something we should talk about more. But one of the other things which I know lots of people have been asking about is how to kind of price a new high value offering that I might have, a new high value program or some sort of product or service. And I think one of the things that'd be really interesting is and maybe we'll send out a little question to everybody tomorrow or something to find out next week. Would you rather we spoke about how to avoid guesswork, finger in the air pricing, or would you rather we spoke around how to kind of launch a new high value course, product or service? And it would be great to get your feedback from that so that we can start talking to one of those points on next week's show.
Brilliant. Well, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to stick that as a poll quickly here for the 12 people who are still with us. So what should we talk about next week? And we either have how to avoid guesswork in pricing, or how to launch a new high value product or service, or how to price. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How to price a new high. Boom. Okay. I'll give you a minute now to answer that poll. And then we'll know what we're going to talk about next week. That'll be helpful. Cool. Great. Well, thank you everyone for your time and for your questions and for the engagement. Is really, really appreciated. As with all of these calls, we want to share. I actually want Ben to share his knowledge and wisdom, but it's also a great opportunity for us to learn more about your challenges and the things that are getting in your way, because then that will mean that we can make sure that the course addresses the most important things that are coming up for you, and we can focus on the value rather than just vomiting content at you.
Word vomit.
Word vomit. Content vomit. Awesome. Okay, everyone, you take care. 4 votes already. How to price a new high value product or service. I think that's already a clear signal from people listening here, and we'll check in again tomorrow to see if anyone who watches the recording influences this vote further.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Ben.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Dizzy. Thank you, everybody else who's hiding behind their screens.
And see you next week. Bye-bye.